Hi there, welcome to Funding by Alex. My name is Alex, and today I would like to talk to you about startup ecosystems. So let's start with the elements. So, what do ecosystems? That's a term you probably heard several times in various contexts. So, there might be investors that are mentioning an ecosystem. There might be founders who actually mention this. There might be government officials who are mentioning this. But what is actually an ecosystem? So, ecosystems actually consist of certain elements. First of all, of course, you have the founders and startups that populate it. So, in essence, founders and startups are the core, the start. Without that, the ecosystem, of course, is not an ecosystem. These founders and startups are supported by several organizations. So, you have support organizations that can be accelerators, incubators, various places where they can actually, accelerate their growth and scale. Then you have funding sources, so venture capital, angel investors, etc. So there might be various funding sources that are connected to it. Then you have education and talent, of course. To start a startup in a place where there is no talent, so basically inhospitable places where the Sahara Desert, for example, there's nobody there. If you start a startup there, might be good for solar power startup, but I mean the talent to move there is difficult. So that's why normally you see concentrations. These ecosystems, let's say Silicon Valley is an ecosystem. You have Bangalore in India is an ecosystem. There are various other places in the world that are trying to attract at least ecosystems to itself. If you look at, in essence, without actually mentioning the name startup, if you look at Italy, where in the past there used to be a lot of companies that made cars. So, you have, let's say, the Silicon Valley of car manufacturers, various precision tooling, for example, hydraulics also is quite popular in Italy. So, there is a lot of knowledge, a lot of companies that are actually doing this. And of course, this develops the skills, and also the education is geared towards providing the workforce for these companies. So, education and talent, I think, is a vital element of this as well. Just like actually everything is a vital element, obviously. But without talented people, you don't have a very successful startup. Then events and networking. So there are places where startups can exchange ideas, network with other people to provide these partnerships. Then, of course, there have to be incumbents. So you have corporations and industry players. So these are the ones you are trying to disrupt. But on the other side, they also have proven that the market exists, and the market to capture. You're innovating. So where corporations actually are very set in their ways, startups innovate. Corporations don't, basically. So. Having said that, corporations have various programs where they spin off, like teams or small companies inside of their company to start a startup, mainly because corporations have a set business model. Take, for example, telecom. If you look at telecommunications, maybe 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that was the advent of VoIP, voice over IP, basically, where instead of charging per minute, they were charging by megabytes back then. Now it's gigabytes probably, but charging data. So in essence, the change there was that companies who were still looking at the old business model, they were gradually being overtaken. So it's just that this business was still there. There were people like it's a slow change, but still the voice business is not completely gone. The charging per minute, but it's been not been the same as 25 years ago, of course. So this is the reason why larger companies who are already depending on that revenue stream, they have internal resources that they can't realign to capture the opportunity of voice over IP or data in this case. So this goes for a lot of different companies where you are competing for resources internally in order to get the focus of the organization on a certain innovation inside. So innovating inside a big corporation is difficult. It's not impossible, but it's an uphill battle. That's why a lot of startups actually come from corporations. So you're talking about industry players and corporations. In this case, the role is that these people work there and they have an idea that they can't actually execute inside this large corporation, this corporate environment. They move out, sometimes with the help of the corporation, like I said, but they move out to actually give the idea some legs. So corporations also have corporate venture capital funds for this specific purpose, to actually spin it off, develop it, and then acquire it again. So this is sometimes that the cycle that innovative people are being acquired by large corporations and then start something new again. Um, Again, this is backed by government policy. So government and policy have to be startup friendly. So you have tax breaks, or like something like an environmental environment that is friendly to startups, where startups can thrive and prosper. Then, of course, culture and community. So this is more a thing where you look at certain countries where governments are very much focused on trying to get the startups going. Every government in the world, I think, has that has that focus. But in some countries, it's more successful than others. So if you look at culture, there are cultures where failure is very difficult to explain. So failing is really failing, like, hey, I'm useless. That feeling. Um, Failure actually is part of the startup uh, journey. So you're talking about, if you fail fast. That is normally the way that it's explained. It's more like a buzzword in essence, or a buzz sentence in this case, where startups are they're trying something that is product market to get product market fit. So you actually have a hypothesis, you are developing into an early idea. That early idea becomes something that you are testing. So you're testing the market, and in some cases you can have done all the work, and your idea simply doesn't fly because there are certain things that you didn't calculate properly, or things simply work out differently. So failure is part of this journey. And some very successful founders, they have failed several times in order to learn more from that. So if your culture and also the community in that sense doesn't support that, that can be like an inhibiting factor for startups to get off the ground. So you have to look at changing community standards, basically, in this case, or taking your startup to a place where the community is and the culture is more startup friendly. That's what I'm trying to say here. Then infrastructure also is actually a no-brainer, but that's again something where you say Silicon Valley. If you look at Silicon Valley, everything is very well organized with regards to infrastructure. You have broadband internet, you have everything that you need, basically, in order to get off the ground, basically, as a startup. Other places might be struggling with this, so the infrastructure might not be there. If you say, hey, I would like to develop my city into, hey, you're a mayor of a city, or like, I'd like to develop this into a startup hub. Yeah, if this infrastructure isn't there, then it's going to be a tough call to actually attract people, startups to your city, basically. So there are several examples. There's an interesting article that I read the other day about a guy who is actually an Indian who lived in the US, and he moved back to India to actually start a startup in India. But he said, both in culture and in infrastructure, as well as actually talent, he was actually having a hard time getting the same vibe as Silicon Valley. So it's not Silicon Valley, which is there, of course, obvious. There's only one Silicon Valley. But I mean, Bangalore was actually one of the places that was really touted to be the Silicon Valley of India. Um, but he still found it a far cry from that, especially because the funding sources, they were actually also really conservative, looking at not being patient, with regards to startups. So you're looking to scale, you're looking for that. So he tried once, they failed, they moved back to the US, then they tried again in India the second time round. Things were a little bit better, but still a far cry from yeah, from Silicon Valley. Not saying India is a bad place to start a startup. It's a very good place to start a startup, actually. But again, some places are more conducive than others. That is what I'm trying to say here. And culturally, of course, some places are more ready than others as well. So, last but not least, of course, media and public relations, because if you have the best idea in the world, nobody knows about it. So media needs to cover it, needs to publicize, of course, the ideas you have. It needs to have an open flow of communication. You need to get ideas. You need to also, of course, promote your startup in this case. So normally it's the age-old picture of having to knock on the door physically of a venture capitalist, and that person writes you a check. Of course, these people need to do some research. So, media and public relations normally is the catalyst for, yeah, getting everything else done. So, partnerships only come when people can find something about your company on Google. If the first 2-3 pages of Google are not littered with your press releases and with your information, um, when they search your company, basically, yeah, then you basically have a problem connecting to the right people. So it can be partnerships, can be funding, can be whatever in this case. Even talent. Talent needs to be attracted in the right way. That can only be done if you do it in the right way with the media and public relations, basically. And the interesting part of this is connecting the dots, of course, where you look at all these elements that you need to line them up. So all of them together are a mix for places where you can find a startup. All these things you need to also keep in mind as a founder. Connecting the dots is basically, if you look at venture capital funds or investors, they are always talking about a portfolio. So it could be that you are lucky and you have, or lucky doesn't have anything to do with luck, but that you actually stumble on someone who is making his very first investment or her very first investment, and as an angel investor, and that you. Mostly venture capital funds, and especially the larger ones, of course, they will have more investments. So something that fits. So they have a thesis. A thesis that means that we only invest, let's say, in early stage deep tech companies that with product market fit and some traction, and they have some sort of um, metrics to back that up, to back up that thesis, basically. Um, that is their vision for, okay, if you're not into that category, so if you say, oh, I have a company but it's not fitting that bill, yeah, they will not invest in you. So that is something that what that automatically does is it creates a pocket of companies that are doing more or less the same thing, and normally they're not going for exactly the same company in the same category, but they're looking for something that complements each other. So different different technologies that maybe fit together, companies that could possibly be each other's customer for something, or a supplier, or a partnership of some kind. In order to say 1+1 is 3 instead of 1+1 is 2. So that is the idea of a portfolio. The importance of that is actually, if you do your research as a founder, you can see from venture capital funds what have they invested in, who have they invested in, what are they looking at. What you can't see is, of course, whether they still have any money left in their fund to to invest in you, or whether there are other considerations that they keep in mind. But you could save yourself a lot of time by doing the proper research and seeing whether this, you can basically see whether they are fitting your bill and you are fitting their bill, basically. Then I've already mentioned it before, but corporates scale, startups innovate. So you basically see like, oh, there's already a big company active in this market. So I better not try. No, that is something, if you have a disruptive technology or a way of doing it better where the large guy, the big guy cannot go. So this is where giants cannot go. You basically look at, could be something where they are inhibited by an existing business model that they don't want to, cut the legs off, so to speak. Um, then startups can go, and they're mean and lean enough to actually do what corporates don't do. So this is a very interesting part of where, like you look at electronics retailers in Europe, for example, or in the US, for all that matters. But electronics retailers, they with the advent of internet, like e-commerce, basically, they were opening a web store, but still the brick and mortar stores were actually doing most of their revenue. Now, so this creates a bit of an internal struggle between the e-commerce team and the offline team, basically, as they call it. So the offline team still brings in most of the money because that's what they already built, even though e-commerce is slowly eroding that offline business model. Um, so to actually start with an online e-commerce company, if I say with an e-commerce company for electronics, yeah, you see the ones that were, let's say in the Netherlands, you have Coolblue, for example, which is a very successful company. The funny thing is that Coolblue, at some point, they even opened stores. So they opened offline stores, while all the other electronics companies, except for the MediaMarkt Saturn company, which was doing well until recently, they were all going the way of the dodo. Basically, if you look at struggling at least to have to go without an online presence, or with the online presence be taking second seat. Same as toys retailers. Also, you have online toys retailers that are starting from scratch versus the brick and mortar toys retailers that actually are struggling to convert to e-commerce. So these are things that normally we start with e-commerce, with the startup idea in mind. Basically, you are more flexible to, and you don't have an existing revenue stream to think of, an existing staff also to pay, of course. Then don't fight alone. Create partnerships. Now that also sounds like a no-brainer, but in the end, there's a lot of things you can do with other companies. This is also part of this ecosystem that I just explained. Is that you can find companies that are, again, to create this 1+1=3 effect, where you are, let's say, sharing the marketing budget. You are creating partnerships where, let's say, you don't have to invent everything from A to Z. That is also the part of, if there is no startup ecosystem, then maybe you have to invent everything in this cycle. Maybe there are some out of the box technologies that you can add to yours, and make it faster, basically, to develop and get to market. Then I really would like to emphasize also that an ecosystem actually has a snowball effect. So if you look at Silicon Valley, is actually the best example, where all these startups from a very long time ago, you're talking about the 70s, where it started, to really strengthen each other, with regards to the entire ecosystem. Everything is geared towards that, towards innovation. That's why also the US is still the front runner in the world of innovation and new technologies. Basically, most of the things that are from there come from there. Basically, you have some other countries that, of course, are on the rise. If you look at China, of course, has a very good startup culture as well, with trying to create, or not saying copy, but let's say create their own version of Silicon Valley. Japan, of course, has innovation at the core. Korea is very, very strong. India also makes a lot of effort to do that. If you look at Europe, there's of course quite a healthy culture as well. So we're looking at various countries where they are trying to specialize in certain things. So Saudi Arabia, for example, has an interesting program for video game companies, where they are trying to attract video game developers. So to as also startups, basically, by funding it. The government is trying them to set up in Jeddah, basically. These are all things that, certain regional or national initiatives that are, looking to snowball, because you attracting a lot of talent. Yeah, of course, this talent will interact, this will grow, this will expand, this will basically attract venture capital, this will attract various things. And it starts with a government initiative in this case. So all these countries are looking to get innovation, of course, inside of their borders, and of course help their economy eventually, because this is the thing with startups. If you are looking at, for example, the advent of AI startups are also rampant in the world now. There are various examples of that. Countries actually really focusing on AI as a spearhead, basically for their startup development. So these are all the dots that you can connect in your head, basically. And I would say, look at the area you're in. It doesn't mean you can't start a startup anywhere else, obviously. But I mean, normally the hotbeds of startup world are already made. And the interesting thing for founders here might be to look at various initiatives from the government. So I came across a startup. There was a YouTube video that was a guy who said he it was in Chile, the South American country, where he moved for 6 months or a year. I forgot how long, but because the Chilean government had a fund that gave them housing, gave them funding, gave them various benefits, basically, to camp out there, incorporate their company there, and they could develop their idea there. So this is actually a good example of it's an American company that actually moved to Chile and did that. So there are various initiatives around the world for various countries. So if you're a startup founder, just Google it or ask ChatGPT to filter it out for you. That's even the shorter version, but you can look at various government initiatives for that around the world, and hopefully that will accelerate your startup journey. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please feel free to reach out to me at alex@goldendragoncapital.co if you have any questions. And please don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this video. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.